Hey there, I am Jeff Ferris. I'm the worldwide tech leader for end user computing. Today we're going to talk about moving your desktops and applications to end user computing on AWS. Now, I've been with Amazon for about 6 years. I started in our professional services team, moved into the Workspaces specialized solutions architecture team, where I've been the principal SA, manager of the specialized SAs, and I am now the worldwide tech leader for the end user computing space. Why are we even talking about some of this stuff? Well, the data center is changing. Today, millions of customers just like you are running solutions on AWS, which is the world's most comprehensive and broadly adopted cloud. Millions of customers, including the fastest growing startups, largest enterprises, and leading government agencies, have moved from on-premises data centers to AWS. And they've done so for the following reasons. The elasticity and agility that you get from AWS versus an on-premises infrastructure is second to none. To get a server typically takes 10 to 12 weeks in a physical world. You've got to build all of the surrounding infrastructure, the software components, the compute, storage, database, and machine learning. In the cloud, you can provision thousands of servers in minutes, so you can get from idea to implementation several orders of magnitude faster. With AWS, you don't have to lay out the capital up front for servers and for data centers. You pay as a variable expense. With traditional infrastructure, you've got to make the trade-off decision early. Do you provision on the low side and worry about outages, or do you provision for peak capacity, which then sits unused for large portions of the time? In the cloud, you can provision what you need. If it turns out you need less, you stop paying for it. We have global scale. You're always wanting to minimize delays and interruptions, and you want to be able to easily support any country-specific data sovereignty requirements, which means you need the flexibility to have a wide selection of geographic regions of data centers in which to deploy your solutions. And you get that with AWS and our global scale. Security is our highest priority. The same security isolations that would be found in your traditional data center are included in AWS. This includes physical data center security, separation of network, isolation of the server hardware, and isolation of storage. One of the great things about AWS is that as a customer, you inherit all of the best practices of AWS policies, architecture, and operational processes built to satisfy the requirements of some of our most security-conscious customers. And reliability. Our reliability is proven. It's one of the main reasons AWS has grown as fast as we have. We've spent over a decade building one of the world's most reliable, scalable, and cost-effective infrastructures. And we have data centers in multiple geographic regions and availability zones within each region to offer maximum resiliency against system disruption. But it's more than just the data center that's changing. It's the way that we work. The globalization of the economy has driven the need to be able to work from anywhere, with anyone, at any time. Today's workforce is increasingly mobile. They're working remotely, on the go, moving from one project to the next, and collaborating across borders, time zones, and organizations. Organizations are increasingly looking for options for employees to work securely from any location, with 1 in 5 jobs now held by contractors. 79% of organizations expect an increase in merger and acquisition activity, and 70% of the workforce needs to be able to work remotely. With this, security becomes increasingly challenging. You want to manage a user base that's constantly changing across desktops, notebooks, mobile devices. Their applications and their files of each user need to be available when they're traveling outside of their network, when they're in their homes, or when they're up to leisure activities. You want all of those things to be able to follow the user without compromising your security. And customers tell us it's these 3 changes, the changing data center, the changing workforce, and those increasing security challenges that are driving them to move their end-user computing to the cloud. Half of IT decision makers are choosing to move their end-user computing workloads to solutions like desktop as a service or VDI, up from 43% just 2 years ago. Organizations are increasingly looking for options to allow their employees to work securely from any location. Whether it's to support work from anywhere, the global workforce collaboration, or to ensure business continuity in the face of a disaster, organizations want remote solutions that they can depend on. AWS provides a set of solutions built on top of the AWS cloud to help quickly enable remote work for employees, contractors, students, and contact center agents. As customers move their end-user computing to AWS, they're often starting with agile workloads at the edge of the enterprise. The contractors, the remote employees, mergers and acquisitions, before moving to workloads that are at the core of their enterprise, perhaps including specialized applications and full VDI deployments. Customers are choosing AWS to realize many of those same core AWS benefits that they cannot get from on-premises solutions. To start, they're simply providing a better user experience by locating their desktops, their applications, and their data. But it goes far beyond that. They're increasing their agility to support onboarding and offboarding contractors and users from around the world, optimizing costs from moving to these massive capital expenditures for VDI servers or physical PCs to a pay-as-you-go pricing model, enabling remote employees by deploying their solutions in AWS regions around the world without ever having to negotiate a data center facilities contract. So let's look at some of these other benefits of the end user computing. Many customers have found that choosing AWS simply provides a better user experience. You can let your users work securely from anywhere in the world with a highly responsive experience because your desktops, applications, and files are all near your data running on AWS. Customers tell us that elasticity and agility are hard to achieve without on-premises VDI or physical PCs. When contractors or new employees start from a merger and acquisition activity, they need desktops and applications and content that works with that new company. And by providing the solution through a VDI infrastructure, you can quickly address those needs and deploy that software that otherwise would have taken weeks to build out in remote data centers or remote locations. With AWS, there's no hardware to purchase. There's no extra steps to deploy and operate those facilities. This lets you securely onboard your contractors and remote employees in hours or days instead of weeks or months. And because there's no hardware to purchase, you're able to optimize your costs, only paying for what you use. We've heard it can be especially challenging to forecast how many contractors or remote employees you'll have. So purchasing specialized hardware for special applications, you can make decisions on the fly with AWS EUC services. And of course, we've got that global scale, security, and reliability behind our platform because everything built in the EUC space is built on top of existing AWS services. So to recap, customers are choosing AWS EUC because we give you the agility to respond to the changing needs of your global workforce by being a fully managed, pay-as-you-go, global, reliable, and secure service. So instead of spending weeks or months purchasing and building secure virtual desktop infrastructure and devices for contractors, you can simply deliver what your users need on demand. Now, some customers still choose to lift and shift Citrix and VMware deployments to AWS. Many customers we speak with have built established on-premises VDI deployments over years with substantial investments in licensing, contracts, and administrator training. They're running on often aging hardware that's struggling to support their users or sometimes looking for additional capacity. So these customers aren't necessarily looking to extend their current VDI to new use cases, but they want to maximize the value of that current investment. AWS lets them continue with consistent and familiar experience on optimized infrastructure, either as a hybrid solution or as a lift and shift. Now, I'm just going to focus on the AWS EUC services for the rest of this session. Customers are choosing AWS EUC because we give you that agility to respond to the changing needs of your global workforce. Instead of spending weeks or months building and securing desktop infrastructure and supplying devices for contractors or remote employees, you can simply deliver what users need on demand that they can access from a low-end device or a home device through managed devices like Chromebooks, through older hardware for the Wintel platform that couldn't otherwise run modern operating systems. And we enable this with a suite of products tailored to your users' needs, including our desktop as a service that comes from Amazon Workspaces, our file storage solution and collaboration solution on Amazon WorkDocs, and then an application streaming solution that we call AppStream 2.0. So who is using these EUC products today? Well, we have more than half of the Fortune 500. Our use case list includes contractors, remote employees, mergers and acquisitions, specialized application support, labs, jump boxes, and regular knowledge workers. We have segments from media and entertainment, from oil and gas to automotive, state and local governments, education, ISVs, healthcare, and more. We believe that you need to do more than just manage servers to be truly agile. And this diagram shows how moving from on-premises VDI to VDI on AWS removes hardware management, and then moving from VDI on AWS to AWS EUC services further removes that VDI software management. You're able to be more agile, focus less on that undifferentiated heavy lift of managing the infrastructure, because even with VDI on AWS, you still have to spend weeks to months building, tuning, configuring, and operating and optimizing that VDI infrastructure with your file shares, your network appliances, and complicated multi-session environments every time your workforce changes. We built AWS EUC services to be fully managed so that you have the ability to onboard contractors, remote employees, and new users from M&A activity in hours or days with deploying specialized solutions for your users in minutes. You simply integrate your IT once, select the pre-configured bundles optimized for your specific use case, and then a few clicks or API calls, you can deploy what your users need. You manage the images, the applications, and your users, and we manage the rest. Even with fully managed infrastructure, you need freedom from those complicated licensing plans, license negotiations, and unexpected licensing changes to agilely respond to changes in your workforce. You can deploy what you need on demand with AWS EUC services because they're fully managed and pay as you go for what you use when you use it. You can bring your existing Windows licenses, but there's no long-term contracts or complex licensing to negotiate on the AWS side. This really lets you optimize your costs by only paying for the contractors when they're on a project, by only scaling up your workforce during surge periods, by streamlining specialized applications to lower cost devices when only when those special capabilities are needed, and by constantly and instantly onboarding your new users with low friction and ease of processes from your administrator side. With Amazon Workspaces, our pricing starts at $21 per workspace per month, or $7.25 per user with a 17 cents per hour usage fee in most AWS regions if you're going with the hourly. And with AppStream 2.0, prices start at $4.19 a month with 10 cents per user per hour in most AWS regions. You can also bring in your existing RDS licenses to not incur that monthly $4.19 per user cost on the AppStream side. Workspaces has two billing models. So there's always on and there's hourly. There's a break-even point of around 82 hours, depending on the size of the instance that you're using, but give or take, depending on what you're using. If your users are running less than 82 hours a month, then you're going to have a more optimized pricing experience using the hourly model. And we provide a cost optimizer to help take the guesswork out of deciding which pricing model you should choose on a per user basis. The cost optimizer runs in your account and analyzes your workspace usage, converts the running mode of a given workspace to the correct mode in a given month, or you can simply use it to do regular recurring reports and understand the usage patterns in your environment. And finally, AWS EUC services are globally available in our regions built around security needs for the most security-sensitive organizations. AWS EUC services go beyond the underlying infrastructure for reliability and security. Many of our services meet multiple security and compliance standards, including HIPAA, PCI DSS, FedRAMP, GDPR, and more, and each service offers a service-level agreement with a commitment of 99.9%. With AWS EUC services, your sensitive company data is no longer flying around the world to contractors, flowing out of your network with remote employees, put at risk because of outdated desktops or applications, or complicated mergers and acquisitions and integrating networks across multiple companies. You no longer need to build out that infrastructure to support all of this, and you can instead focus on providing the exact solution that your users need. So we're going to look a little bit at the AWS end user computing, customer journeys, personas, and some common use cases. I'm going to dive into how customers are using AWS EUC services for all of these use cases that we've just been talking about: the contractors, the remote employees, M&A, specialized applications, and VDI replacement. When it comes to customer journeys with EUC, we tend to see three different patterns. It's not one size fits all, but there are definitely some recurring patterns. The first can best be understood as starting with personas where agility and security are most critical, where workers are variable in their onboarding and perhaps less trusted. When you're onboarding contractors and partners, often that work with a third-party relationship, and this cuts across your knowledge workers, specialists, and task worker type profiles. Then we'll see customers add transitory workers, where the relationship is temporary, like a seasonal worker, or during onboarding of acquired company in those early stages before the full integration is complete. And then more and more, as we move down the continuum, we'll see companies go all in with their corporate staff, add more remote FTEs, full-time employees. Their general remote connectivity solutions delivered through these AWS solutions. And perhaps users who are temporarily remote during a DR event, or if they're just typical workers on the road for business or vacation and need to get access to their work. And as that moves down the continuum, we continue to see more of your population, more of the corporate users get that same benefits from the increased security and cloud economics with our solutions. And we do have those other two use patterns as well. Customers who are doing VDI migrations as they look to accelerate their cloud migration and move from their legacy VDI into the cloud. And then we'll see companies giving a fast, lightweight access to one or two complex applications, something like SAP or Esri's ArcGIS Pro, so to targeted users through our AppStream products. This is a quick way to provide those complex applications in a pre-configured state without doing a lot of heavy integration lift. Let me dive a little deeper on the main pattern, our most common customer journey, and we'll talk about how companies think about the right EUC solution for each persona. So first we have contractors and partner personas, right? A lot of times these task workers, perhaps they're in a contingent call center, they're using a desktop experience that can run on a standard bundle, so a relatively low hardware requirement, a lot of web apps, some low compute intensity applications. These users tend to be willing to work on the tools they're given as they're directed, following very specific operational models for some general purpose applications. This can be data entry or as I said, call center. Either standard bundles on Workspaces or general purpose instances on AppStream 2.0 are usually good fits for this space. Then you'll have the specialists. So they're still in that contractor use case, but perhaps they have some higher requirements, right? You hire someone to do a marketing program and they need some higher graphics capability. So you can spin off to a graphics workspace or use graphics AppStream instances if you're really only looking at one or two applications. These tend to be users who are bringing their own device or a device provided by that third-party agency. Usually they're going to expect a more full desktop experience where they can customize their tools, perhaps with things that aren't in your library. And then there's the knowledge workers, the management consultants, partners who are generally using Office suites. They may be able to get by with that standard or performance Office bundle, something running Workspaces, just enough to deliver those core applications. But they're still expecting that full desktop experience with a little bit of variety over their applications over time. As you move into the transitory personas, you end up with seasonal workers. Again, they tend to be using a set number of applications, and that's really where either a custom image on Workspaces can come in, where they don't necessarily need those admin rights, or an AppStream 2.0 general purpose instance where you've delivered a number of specific applications to that user. For the M&A activity, the most common pattern that we'll see there is a workspace that gives access to the acquiring company's infrastructure. So you provide the workspaces of the acquired company to those users. They're able to access those new applications, that new infrastructure, those new resources without heavy network integration work. And then classes and labs. This is another one that's kind of an interesting use case for AppStream 2.0 because you can do very specific targeted training to groups of users. And you're controlling that experience of the environment that you're delivering to those users. You know that every user has the same hardware capability that you've tested out for all of the applications required for the coursework, and it gives you a much more consistent and reliable user experience for those types of use cases. Then we move into the remote and mobile personas and use cases. This tends to be the regular corporate employees that just need remote access, or perhaps are getting provisioned access to their hardware without waiting for physical equipment to ship. The devices that they can use to access that infrastructure could be lower end laptops, bring your own device, Chromebooks. The user experience is near native responsiveness and experience. For me, I do a lot of my work on the road. I have been a pure Workspaces user for the last 5 years that I've been at Amazon. I don't have a corporate-owned device. I haven't used a VPN connection in many years. I do all of my work through my corporate workspace. We also see disaster recovery events. This could be any user in your company at some point in time. Outside experiences cause you to need to have a large portion of your workforce working remotely. Well, it's a great way to provide that access both to your existing users and to the new hires that come on during that time period. We also see, the highly mobile workers, the executives, the sales and field technicians that change locations or change offices frequently, but want to have a consistent experience without having all of that corporate sensitive data on a device. So as you continue to move through those environments, combining some of our solutions in particular, most of these other components of your corporate personas are very similar to what you see in the remote users. But I did want to call out the specialists. These are the users that have special purpose hardware in addition to their regular user applications, their standard Office applications. So in these cases, you might provide a slightly higher end workspace in addition to delivering those core applications as special need applications through AppStream. So you can give them higher compute, higher memory, or higher GPU in just that single instance. And this is very much one of the use cases that we've taken at Amazon.com. This is very similar to the journey that we had in our initial implementation of the corporate workspaces solution. I was actually a ProServe consultant at the time, working with our Amazon.com desktop engineering team on the corporate workspaces solve. We started by solving for a merger and acquisitions use case, but of course, I wasn't going to let a good network integration go to waste, so that's when I moved my own daily driver over to Workspaces. As I mentioned, I have since been running with just my workspace with no VPN. And as we continued rolling out, first to AWS users and then to the rest of the corporate environment, in response to some of the changing business conditions over the last few months, many areas are now allocating workspaces by default rather than sending out those physical assets. And now we did this case study earlier in the year. The numbers have gone up significantly in the last few months, but when we first did this case study back in late January, early February, we were looking at 25,000 global contractors, remote employees, and other users with restricted access to resources provided through that Workspaces solution. Our corporate IT team was able to change the onboarding process to solve the onboarding for users in a matter of minutes instead of days or weeks to ship hardware or add networking to buildings. And there's an expected annual savings at Amazon.com of more than $17 million. That includes things like not having to connect corporate networks to new locations as we expand our physical office space. And it reduces the demand on IT support by enabling those self-service capabilities for the users. And you can see the link here. We've got the full case study up on our website, so I really encourage you to take an opportunity to go out and read through some of what we learned as part of that process. All right, with that, we are going to go to a demo. Okay, let's take a look at how we would create a new workspace for a new user. So first off, log into your AWS Management Console and go to the Workspaces service. Now from here, if you don't already have a directory, you'll need to walk through the directory creation wizard to connect to either your Active Directory environment or to create a standalone directory for your workspaces. I already have some existing directories, existing workspaces, so we're just going to launch a new one in one of those directories. I'm going to pick my demo directory here, and we're going to look for the user. There I am, add selected. Now you can add multiple users at this stage, and you can select different bundle types for each of those users on this site. So now, as we select the bundle represents both the CPU, memory, and starting storage configuration, as well as the operating system. I'm going to pick standard with Windows 10, and you'll see that updated in the list here. You can update your root volume sizes or your user volume sizes as you wish. On the next page, we determine whether or not this is going to be an always-on or an auto-stop workspace, and you can decide whether to use volume encryption or not. If you're using volume encryption, you use the AWS Key Management Service, or you can bring your own keys into that. Since this is just a throwaway demo workspace, I am not going to bother with encryption. You can also add tags here to stick with any standards that you have for tagging resources in your AWS account. Okay, this page just reviews the configurations that we selected, so we're going to launch. and that's going to take about 20 minutes to spin up. So rather than waiting for that, I've got a previously created workspace right here. And you can see it looks like just a regular Windows 10 desktop. Now, I have left some of the user self-service options on in the directory. So if we go under settings, I have some options here to change my compute type, change my disk size, or even change running mode. So this workspace right now is set to always on. I could switch that to auto stop if I know I'm going to be out or not using my workspace for a while, or I could if I need to change my compute type, right now I'm on power. If I need a little bit more power, I can bump that up. If I need less power, I can bring that down to something a little bit lower end. Now, this is a capability that you can leave enabled for your users. You can enable similar functionality through your own service catalog if you want to do specific tracking. Our extensive API allows you to make those types of integration decisions. And all of these settings are controlled under the directory options here. So if I go into that directory, under Actions, Update Details, User Self-Service permissions are under this section. You can decide which functions to allow your end users to control on their own. Okay, going back to the workspace, let's try to start up an application. Now, this is not a GPU-enabled workspace. So when I try to start something with a GPU dependency like Blender, I'll get an error that it can't detect 3D hardware acceleration. So this could be caused by a missing or faulty graphics driver installation, accessing through a remote connection, or using Blender on a virtual machine. Happens that all three of those are true, so we know why I can't run Blender on this workspace. But I'm a power user, so sometimes I need a graphics application. That's where you can bring in something like Amazon AppStream to bring those extra capabilities to the user when it's needed. Now I'm going to run this through the native application mode. All right, these are the applications that I have access to within AppStream. So we're trying to run Blender. Let's go ahead and kick that up. Okay, and here we can see that Blender is up and running, and it looks like a regular Windows application. You can't tell that that's running through AppStream. Now the difference is I'm giving this user access to hardware capabilities that don't exist within their workspace. So this is great for special purpose products, or perhaps tools that just require a little bit more horsepower to run. If you're running something like SAP GUI, or if you're running ArcGIS Pro from Esri. Spawning out to those sessions in an AppStream instance means that you can give the user a smaller workspace, but just run those higher intensity resources when needed for a particular application. And there is no need to actually run Workspaces and AppStream together for your regular users if they're just general Office users, or working with standard Office suite. A full desktop experience will work, and you don't need to configure both services. All right, so that was a little bit about both the administrative experience and the end user experience with our Workspaces and AppStream products. So what's next? I really want you to think about your existing EUC services. Do you have an existing VDI solution, and does it meet your needs and vision, both for your end users and for your administrators? Do you have third-party contractors for whom you're buying devices or potentially creating security risks by deploying hardware and allowing replication of your content out to those systems that are then taken off-site and into areas that are outside of your IT control? How do mergers and acquisitions and integration play into your growth plan? Is it a frequent activity where you regularly need to provide rapid access to your corporate infrastructure to third parties? Or is it something that you do fairly rarely? Do you operate in markets where potentially you don't have that local IT infrastructure or support? With AWS EUC services, all you need to provide is a network connection, and those users are able to get connected to those services and operate. So next steps, you can learn more about all of our products at https://aws.amazon.com/products/end-user-computing. You could schedule an AWS EUC deep dive on your use case with your account management team. Or, if you're looking for someone that can help you with the implementation process and the analysis of your environment, reach out to one of our many AWS EUC competency partners, and you can find all of those listed on the AWS website. And you can also schedule an AWS EUC immersion day with your team. The immersion days are a good way to really deep dive on your specific use cases, the problems you're trying to solve, the things that are important to your organization. We have both Workspaces and AppStream focused workshops that we can help run your team through to really help make everyone comfortable with the products that we offer. All right, and with that, I'm Jeff Ferris. Thank you very much for your time today. Hope that you've all learned something that you can take forward and use when solving problems for your end users in the future.